Welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thank you, as always, for joining me for another episode of the show. NBA free agency has kind of come and went, and, a couple of deals on the margins still yet to be made. But for the most part, it's kind of, we're gearing up for Summer League and getting ready for the season in a couple months. So what's been happening lately is that free agency's been a little bit not as high volume, high voltage as it has been in the past. And I think a lot of that has to do with this new collective bargaining agreement, or CBA for short. And I wanted to talk about that. And to join me today to talk about that is a guy who I've been following now for a little while on Threads, who is, if you're on that platform, is a must follow, is Chris Lindsey at Chris Lindsey Hoops on Threads. Chris, thank you for joining me.
Omar, my guy, what's going on, bro? Glad to be on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, as I was telling Chris before the episode, I was listening to Griffin Proc's show about sports, and he had you on, and I was just like, man, I haven't had Chris on, and I was just like, I really need to correct that error. And you've been super tuned in, dialed into all this offseason stuff, and it was a great opportunity, I think, to kind of really talk about why free agency has kind of felt a little diminished. Like, I think as a Knicks fan, I'm always going to find a way to bring the Knicks into it immediately. Josh Hart was posting on July 1st. He's like, where's the notifications? Where's the free agency? Shams, where are you? And then the deals started coming in. I guess before we get into all the stuff about the first, second apron and the new luxury tax, am I wrong in thinking that free agency just doesn't hit the same as it did maybe 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so, man. I think you're spot on, right? Because it's like the big fish get moved in some ways. Teams are trying to be strategic on how they build out their rosters. And we already know it's a copycat league. And since we're finally kind of like in our fifth year, more or less, out of the super team era, now it's kind of like that weird transitional period. So when it comes to free agency and we see how things are done, remember they're moving the time back, and they moved it forward because deals and guys were already agreed to right when the minute happened. I think that was like specific in I think it was 2020 or 2019, I believe, with like Kevin Durant going to the Nets, like
Kawhi.
1201. Kawhi as well. It was like, boom, it's already happened. And it doesn't give other teams a chance. And they try to make it a fair playing field. And then that's when they, started bringing in all the other stuff. Like, hey, are we going to have to start vetting phones? Like, what's going on? And you can't do all that, right? You can't control it, especially with tampering. So, yeah, I feel like it's kind of lost its pizzazz a little bit, where now it's like the regular season matters a little bit more. They've been trying to get more people involved with that, as we've seen with in-season tournament. And then the key dates are always the trade deadline, buyout market. It's like opening night, buyout market, trade deadline, playoffs or whatever. And then it's going to be free agency. But since there hasn't been many guys available that could really like move the needle, at least big names, it hasn't really had that big buzz as much as it did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like, who's the biggest signing this offseason? Like, I'm throwing KD out of here because that was a trade, right? But as far as like a free agent size, Miles Turner, maybe, and it's just like, I don't know, like, no disrespect to Miles Turner, he's a really good player, but this isn't KD and Kyrie to the Nets. This isn't Kawhi and Paul George to the Clippers, right? It's just kind of lost a little bit of its luster. I do have a funny story about the Kawhi signing, though. So when that happened, I was living in Detroit at the time, and a friend of mine, we were at a show downtown for this rapper, Elzai, Detroit rapper. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, but it was in this little like standing room only venue that had these concrete floors, and we had no idea the show was about to be 4 hours long, so our legs are dead. And in the middle of the show, right before the main act comes on, we get the notifications, and it's just like, oh, Paul George going to the Clippers, Kawhi going to the Clippers. So on the way home, my friend and I were, instead of talking about how awesome this concert was, which it was, we were just talking about, what does this mean for the NBA? Like, are the Clippers the new championship favorites? And we thought they would be, and obviously we saw how that panned out. But I do want to talk here about the new landscape. So this new CBA, they introduced the first apron tax, second apron tax, and obviously as teams get closer to that second apron, they potentially lose draft picks. They have to do like-for-like salaries. How do you view that the introduction of this had shifted the way that rosters are being built now in today's NBA?
I don't know. For me personally, like I do notice that you have to have a lot more creativity when you're building out your roster. You can't just buy everybody, the old Steinbrenner way, Cowboys way. Obviously, the CBAs in those sports work different than the NBA. But I feel like you have to be real strategic on how you're building out your roster to make it competent in order to compete at a high level. Because if you don't, then you end up being like certain teams that we see that just can never make it because they can't acquire anybody. And then owning your draft picks, that has to be a key as well. Like having those, starting your farmhouse early, keeping guys in. It seems like the days, like I mentioned, of free agency, like in big trades and big free agent signings, they're just not there anymore because teams are intimidated and scared of that apron or getting close to it. Because if you see a situation like with the Phoenix Suns, where you get these three big names, three big contracts, they're all tied up, and then you can't fill out your roster, and even your veteran minimums are at a minimal. Then you're trying to give a mid-level exception, and then God forbid one of the guys get hurt, and now you don't have enough. Now you're pulling from the G League. You're trying to make these. So I think teams are trying to be more strategic in how they're building, and you're only at this point allowed to have like 2 max stars, and then another like good mid-level guy that's going to fill out your roster. But yeah, I think those changes have really made a lot of teams scared so they don't get hit with those penalties.
Yeah, I think with OKC winning the title now, a lot of people are going to look at them as the blueprint. You acquire the young star, you draft the other young star. Those are the two kind of focal pieces you talked about. And then you just have all these draft picks that become like, I likened this in a previous episode to pulling on a slot machine, hoping that you get somebody who's a good rotation player, like a Kason Wallace, for example, or Aaron Wiggins. And you get all these guys because your top level guys are going to be so expensive. It's almost kind of eroded the NBA's middle class, right? Where it's like you're trying to get the $70 million super duper star, but you're also trying to get, your rookie contract, low cost, late first, early second round guys that can contribute right away. So I think what we're starting to see now, Chris, too, is like maybe some of these teams just haven't really adapted to that. Like the best example right now is the Boston Celtics, right? Like they won their championship, of course, right? And they built this organically for the most part. Their big stars from the draft, a lot of their key rotation players also drafted, like Peyton Pritchard. And now they kind of try to run it back. It didn't work out. Obviously, JT gets hurt. And now they were kind of fire sailing a little bit. And you're kind of like looking at this next season as a lost season. And so do you think that there are teams now that just haven't been able to navigate the wave as well, and now they're kind of having the repercussions, like the Suns that you mentioned, like Denver, you could argue, for this past year before this year, now that they're kind of in a better cap situation?
Yeah, I think so too, man, because a lot of teams are just adapting fast enough. And since it's so new, there is no blueprint. So almost everybody's learning in real time. It's like if let's just say, a team like the Bulls, we're not good enough to be bad, but we're not bad enough to be good. So we're right there in the middle, and we're always a playing team, but like a 10 seed, and we're trying to compete. You know what I mean? So it's like it makes it weird. Then if you're the Celtics, you're trying to build your dynasty. There's more parity in the league. You drafted your 2 guys, like you said, and you drafted your other key guys and got your ancillary guys via free agency or by other means. And then all of a sudden it just goes away and you can't sustain it anymore. So now Oklahoma City wins, and we know it's a copycat league. So when one team wins, everyone tries to copy and be like, oh, hey, that's the blueprint of winning, but not realizing sometimes it doesn't work like that. It takes way more than just like, oh, hey, he's a big guard, he's tall, he's cheap, and look what the market is for X player. But it's like, well, that's not what your guy's going to do. Like, you know what I mean? So it makes teams like really like nervous to kind of see, like, because no one knew. They're like they're venturing into the unknown until someone builds a consistency of winning like that. Then everyone almost, like, even with OKC, okay, you won this year and maybe you'll get close next year, but after that, then it blows up. So then now you get guys like your Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgrens that are like, well, yeah, I'm gonna play big enough and hard enough to get that paycheck. But yeah, you can do that, but you won't be here. Like, you know what I mean? And it just makes building out your team longevity wise very difficult to do.
You talked about the Bulls, and that brings up a separate thing I'm kind of curious about for your take on Bulls. Now the Pacers as well refuse to pay the luxury tax, right? And I always feel like the Bill Simmons mentioned this on his podcast, I think this week, where they're just such a mismanaged asset they play in a huge market in Chicago. They have the DNA from Jordan and even the Derrick Rose era of goodwill, and they've just kind of been floundering for like the past decade. And what do you make of these teams that just refuse to even go over the first apron, let alone the second apron? Is that, and in this era, kind of just saying, well, we're not even trying to compete? Is it more like baseball? We have like a team with a low payroll, like the Kansas City Royals or the Pittsburgh Pirates, kind of trying to like, well, we're just trying to develop talent, and if we catch lightning in the bottle, so be it. Are they kind of doing a disservice? Well, when they're teams like that.
Yeah, I think so in a way. But as long as that's what your mission statement is initially, like this is what we're going to do, stick with it and build that way, right? As we see, the organic way to build has been the thing. The last, outside of Shea, the last finals MVPs from 2021 all were drafted by their original team. And sure, Shea played 1 year at the Clippers. So technically, if you want to get like that, like, you know what I mean? He's pretty much been a Thunder his entire career. But teams like that, they're like floating in the middle. They're like behind the 8 ball. And then the NBA has so many things that they're trying not to let happen. Like they don't want to reward tanking. Then they don't want to reward winning now, it seems like. But they don't want to reward the rich teams who can pay for everybody and go to these destinations. So it kind of puts them behind the 8 ball, even like a team like the Hornets or Charlotte or even the Wizards. It's like, what are we doing? So then now, when you're bringing in talent, you get this dumpster fire of guys, and it's like, well, we don't even know what we're going to do because, again, like I mentioned, these new aprons, all this stuff, we don't want to cross over that because we're looking at this kid who's in high school right now. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, if we're bad enough, but we kind of fake it like we're bad, but we're still competitive, and maybe instead of 15 games of winning, let's try to get 25. And it's like, it's just kind of hard to build that way. And it puts teams behind the 8 ball, and it doesn't make for a good product overall. And you got to think of the precedents that it sets.
Yeah, it feels like the NBA really wants to bolster up the middle, right? Where they're like, well, okay, your top level teams are going to be your top level teams. We don't want your bottom level teams to just be egregiously losing like the process Sixers or something like that, right? And, like right now, there's really not much of an incentive to tank. Like you look at like the Wizards and the Jazz, right? They kind of tanked the end of the last year, and they got screwed over in the draft pick. And the 2 years in a row, teams with terrible odds have gotten the number 1 pick. Atlanta last year, and then Dallas this year. And so I kind of want, it brings me up into the whole parity thing you already mentioned. It feels like now teams have a 3-year window generally before aprons and taxes and different contracts come due, right? And it's why I thought why I understood why Halliburton played in Game 7, even though there was a chance he would get injured. He doesn't know when they're going to be able to get back there, right? Because you're operating with a team that knows that they're not going to pay the tax, and that the Miles Turner thing's already lingering. So you have a lot of, incentive to do it now. So, I mean, do you think that that's a good thing? Like, I think like it's a weird, I saw a graphic. It was like, under David Stern, certain amount of champions over 30 years. And then under Adam Silver, it's like a lot more than that in fewer amount of years, which is like where the argument is David Stern is dynasties versus the parity of Adam Silver. And really, we haven't seen this level of parity since the 70s. And that's what I think this current era is. There is no real super elite team. Do you think that's good? Or is it better when we have these crazy dynasties that rip off 2, 3, 4 in a row?
It's like in the middle for me personally, because I love the dynasties. I grew up in the end of the Jordan three-peat, the Kobe and Shaq era. That was more of my time that I saw things happening. And I think fans after a certain time just get tuned out because, like we saw with the Warriors and the Cavs, we already know who's going to be there. We don't even want to watch it, or we may not be that tuned in, right? But now everyone cried and they wanted parity. So now they have it where it's unpredictable and you don't know, almost kind of like football and baseball. It's kind of like evened out a little more. You're still going to get your top teams who are always going to be in the race for it. But then you never know. You could be the Indiana Pacers. You can be the Miami Heat who sneak in and get into the finals. And for me personally, as a basketball, I think that's interesting. But I get it for some fan bases. They just want to see the same thing over and over again. But then the majority don't like that because we only saw Michael Jordan do it. Like, we saw Magic do it in the 80s. You saw Kobe and Shaq do it. Duncan even can be thrown in there. You know what I mean? So I think it's just a balance of finding between the two. And again, this is our 5th year out of the super team era. So after the Raptors kind of shook the table in 2019, everything has just been up and down where teams can't even get to back-to-back finals even.
Right. Yeah, I kind of like, from a perspective of a basketball fan, you love seeing new blood. And again, as a fan of a team that has not done a lot of winning, it's like, oh, we got a chance. It's like there is no Jordan insurmountable mountain to climb, no Kobe insurmountable mountain to climb. But at the same time, I feel like the league, from a viewership perspective, probably likes it when a LeBron is going to the finals multiple years in a row, right? And that kind of gets into the whole who's the face of the league conversation. And it's kind of weird. It's like, for the casual fan, not great. But for the diehard NBA fan like us, it's great, because 1 year you get to see Jokic, another it's Giannis, Wemby's coming up now. So we'll see how far he can go and all that. And, it kind of gives everybody a little bit of a slice at the pie, so to speak. And I think that's good. Now, we talked about this, or alluded to it earlier, where the CBA kind of killed free agency, and now everything is done kind of through trade requests and that sort of thing. Do you view that? Do you view that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because for a while, everybody looked forward to the beginning of July. It's like, oh man, it's one of the biggest NBA days of the year. You had mentioned that, where there's deadline and opening night, Christmas Day. There's like certain moments on the NBA calendar. Do you think what free agency has become is a little bit of, is it good or bad? Because that 7-team trade that everybody was excited about, and I knew it wasn't going to be anything. I was like, it's going to be some draft picks, rights to some international guy. It's going to be nothing. So, has what it's become, is this good or bad for the league?
I think it's, again, the GMs and the governors are getting their powers back since we've had so many years, namely kind of like with the Brooklyn Nets and that kind of mix up where guys are like, hey, I'm not playing. And then, or the James Hardens, right? These things where you're asking out, and then it looks bad on the league. And then it looks like that the players are in control, which in some way they are, but then they're not at the end of the day. Because if you sign this contract and we give you this money, our expectation is you to fulfill your contract out for its entirety. But then when a player doesn't like a change, or as we've seen kind of with Harden, hey, I don't like how they changed this, I'm not coming to camp. And it's like in the NFL, that's standard practice, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to show up if you don't want to. You won't get paid, but that's up to you, right? Because they have a shorter season too. But in the NBA, it's like, well, no, we need to get our synergy going. We need to get our momentum going. We need to build our chemistry. And if player X, who's our best player, doesn't want to be here, then what happens? And we dealt with that from when Harden left the Rockets right after the bubble, I think it was, in that 2021 season that came up when they had got John Wall and Boogie, and they got rid of Russ, and they, everyone just kind of was scattered around a little bit. Right. It made it to where like Harden was like, no, like he might be the poster child of it. And you can even go back a step further, even with Kawhi. Hey, I'm injured. I don't want to play, but you got to play. No, I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else. So it's like all these ramifications happen, and it impacts a lot on free agency, because now teams are like, well, hey, if I'm the governor of a team, I don't want to give upset player who's 22 right now, and he'll be mad by 26. But hey, we gave him $50 million a year to play on our bad team. Then you end up like Bradley Beal, where you're 32 years old with a $50 million contract, and they move you. And it just makes hard for players to ask out. You know what I mean? Like it just, and then publicly when they're asking, they're tweeting about it, they're going on podcasts now. It's like they're trying to like get that all out of the way so it doesn't make the league look bad. So it's just like this weird, like kind of space that we're in. Since again, it's still so brand new.
Yeah, I think another thing is like, even if a player, like, well, we'll say use Giannis as an example. He said, hey, I want to go to Miami or I want to go to New York, right? Hypothetically. And like those teams might not be in a position either to make it work financially or to offer a compelling enough package. And now in today's world, you're kind of operating in the NBA. It's like, I need depth, right? Like I can't just get nothing, like the Luka trades it's a misnomer. Like it's a rare unicorn that no one ever sees, because you got one star player but not a lot of depth, and you didn't really get draft capital. Usually it's one or the other. It's just like it's kind of a weird situation where like you can say you want to go to a certain place, but trades now have become so hard in this apron era because of all the restrictions and everything. And I almost wonder if the NBA has a little bit of buyer's remorse on that, because if you really think about it, the encore product is awesome for the NBA, but what really moves the needle in terms of conversation is, oh, is this guy going to go here? Is this guy going to ask out there? Where does this guy going to go to help compete for another championship? You know, those are the type of conversations. It's like what I call it, their first take topics, right? You know, they're just like, that's what moves that needle. And it's not, and you saw it during the finals. Like, instead of talking about the games, Stephen A. Smith was talking about John Morant in Memphis. You know, it's just like, you know,
yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, I agree. But, you know, it's just like, that's kind of maybe a bad for business type of thing. Like the NFL now, I think, is really cut into the conversation radius of the NBA. And the way they used to keep it is, who's going to have a discontented summer? Is there going to be a negotiation? And LeBron is trying his best right now, right? Like to keep the conversation going. I guess. Well, you're in California, so I guess. What's your read on that whole LeBron thing? A little off topic. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, I feel like the relationship between LeBron and the Laker fans, you know, these 8 years has kind of grown to its end, but it's almost amicable, right? It's almost like, hey, you know what? Thank you for everything. We appreciate you. You got us one clutch game for the last, 5-6 years. And I think him losing Genie, that was his crutch in a way, right? Where it's like, hey, listen, this guy signed to my agency or my friend's agency. He's great. He's going to be a good piece on this team. Okay, LeBron, let's do it. So they kind of played his game these last couple of years, you know what I mean? And one thing I always mentioned, like to my friends, is that LeBron's always played for a franchise where his last name is bigger than the name on the front. Right. But him coming into the Lakers, he had to learn after year one, so I can't sit far away from the bench and be condescending about my teammates in the media, especially to my young core, and expect it to work because I'm in Los Angeles. Like, people just saw Kobe retire. They saw these other things. I have a lot more to do. So once he was able to focus and figure that out, obviously the bubble happens, Kobe passes and everything. And then he really endeared himself to the community, to the fans, and the LeBron and Kobe fans were able to kind of merge together a little bit, which was always nice because I'm a huge Kobe guy, right? And I love LeBron too. So I just feel like everyone just is like, okay, why are you opting in? Right? Like, now you're messing us up. We're supposed to build for our future. And now we have new ownership who's like, well, we don't care who was here before. We're the new ownership, there's a new sheriff in town, and we want to build, and you're jamming us up. So we need to figure out what we're going to do, like, moving forward. So it's like, is this your last year? Like, you got to tell us. You can't kind of hold us hostage anymore. And I feel like he's starting to feel kind of like those conversations, with the subliminals, being in Cleveland and wearing the hat, coming home hat, or home, something like that on his golf hat.
Right.
I'm always out here. Like, it just leaves too much to interpretation when he's a very intentional person. You know what I mean? So it just makes it like that. But I just feel like most of the fans are just like, you know what? We got our star. Let's build and let's go from there. Listen, it's your 23rd year. Thank you for all your services, but you could go somewhere else at this point.
I mean, do you think he is going to be moved, or do you think he's actually going to play out this season?
See, and that's the tough part. Like, I've been hearing like, oh, well, maybe send him to Cleveland. Obviously, that's the storybook ending, and then they get pieces. But Cleveland was the 1 seed last year. I don't see them gutting their team to give him a send off where it's just like, oh, hey, it's me, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley. Like, sure, like I don't see that. So honestly, I think he's just going to play a year out with the Lakers. And then, too, I think 23 years, like, he wears number 23. He might announce it before the season so he can get his farewell tour, as it were. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to kind of be like that. I think he just stays, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Lakers are like a scrub roster. It's like you just got Ayton, who, depending on how you feel about that, you still have a top 5 player in the league in Luka, so there are pieces there, and I don't think it's like some people have made it out to be like he's playing for the Charlotte Hornets or something. And it's like, it's definitely not the case. Like, the West is really good. Don't get me wrong. Houston got a lot better, but that's not to say the Lakers are, some lottery team or something. But so we kind of talked earlier about how some of these teams are being punished for being good, and I immediately think about, again, I'm sorry, I'm bringing up the Knicks again, but it reminds me of last summer when the Knicks wanted to retain Isaiah Hartenstein, and they couldn't. They couldn't offer enough money. OKC gave him $30 million a year. Yeah, let me pack my bags and go to Oklahoma City, obviously. But the Knicks were capped. They would have offered him more if they could have. But even though they had the cap, because that was before the cat trade and everything, and they couldn't because of just like the way the CBA was structured around certain players making a certain amount of money and percentage of annual raises and all that. And it seemed, and we see it with the Celtics where they've had to dismantle now, where they've had to make a bunch of consolidation trades, and it happens all over the league. Where I'm waiting for it to happen with Oklahoma City because I feel like they're going to have to make a J-Dub and Chet decision. You can't keep them both because they're both going to be max guys. So you're not going to be able to keep them both. So what do you think that this is kind of just, is it kind of a little unfair? Like a team builds smartly, scouts players, makes good trades. Like again, using the Hartenstein example, he was nobody in terms of on anybody's free agent radar when the Knicks initially got him from the Clippers. And then he turns into like this really viable starting level center. And they helped build him up into that. And instead of being rewarded for that smart scouting, they're punished. And now they kind of felt like they're backed into this trade where they have to make a deal. And then Julius Randle goes out, the whole thing. So are smart teams being punished in today's NBA?
100%. I think there's no reward for it. It's like, hey, yeah, you can win a championship and make 3 conference finals, but yeah, we're gonna have to break that up because you got to think too. All your best players outside of your star, let's say you have 2 or you have 3 or guys that you drafted, they all have different representation as an agents. So they're hearing, hey, so and so is gonna get this much. Hey, so and so can get that much. And then again, like Dorian Finney-Smith, hey, you can't stay here, but the Lakers can't offer you what Houston's going to offer you, and you get no tax. And so, oh, well, see you guys later. I'm out. Less pressure. Yeah, bye. Like you said, again, with Hartenstein, the Knicks, beautiful city, New York. I used to live in New York. I love New York. It was amazing. But it's like, if you're going to give me $30 million, I could live in OKC for, from October to the end of the season. You know what I mean? So it's like, It just depends. You got to weigh, and each guy is different. But the NBA is essentially kind of in a way punishing the good teams. And then there's no way of, making it better, because then back in the day they used to reward bad teams, right? It's like, oh, if you win 15 games, you can get the best player in college. And it's like, oh, so you mean I can really like play bad and get a reward? And then teams started kind of doing things. So now it's almost, we're on the other scale where it's like, hey, you could play really good like Boston, you could play really good like Oklahoma, build organically, but after maybe your 3rd or 4th year, we're going to have to get some guys up out of there. And it's like, oh, and as Draymond said once, any great dynasty that has been built in the NBA has all gone away because of money. You can go back to the Bulls, as we saw in The Last Dance. You could see it with the Lakers in the 2000s. At some point, Shaq wanted more. Nope, we got to give it to Kobe. We're not invested in you. You're old. And that was a 33-year-old old at the time. You know what I mean? So with the Warriors, can't afford you, got to go. So all these dynasties just get broken up. Obviously, you're never going to give LeBron what he's fully worth and what he does for your team, but Miami, hey, I'm taking a pay cut. Not everyone's Tim Duncan that's just like lives a very cool, chill lifestyle off the grid. Yeah, I could be the 53rd highest paid player in the league and I already have 4 rings, no problem. Like, not everyone's going to do that. So it's a rarity to find guys that are like that, but yeah, essentially they're just being punished for being too good, which is weird because then it messes up the dynasties.
It's so strange. It's like you would think you would want that great team that really drives in newer fans and stuff. And like when the Warriors were awesome, like Steph was that guy, right? Because he's a relatable guy. He's not this Adonis like Giannis, right? He's and it's a skill you could learn, shooting threes. And so that resonated with a lot of people. And instead it's just kind of like, well, we have to be a little bit more equitable. And it's just like, so it's like, I like it, but I don't. It's just kind of a weird thing. Like, I want good teams to be rewarded. Like if you scout a guy in the 2nd round, you should be rewarded for identifying that talent, right? Like the Nuggets should get a gold pass for the rest of eternity for finding Jokic when they did. It's just like, but it becomes difficult. You gotta make tough decisions as they have had to do and so many others have. Kind of looking back at all the trades and the moves that happened, I kind of wanted to just kind of get what are some moves here that really excited you this offseason that you were like, wow, that was a really smart decision. I really like that move.
I would say a lot of what Denver was able to do, coming up off of Michael Porter Jr.'s contract, and then you essentially replace him with Cam Johnson, Tim Hardaway Jr. and you bring back Bruce Brown and you have Christian who's still doing things. They're really good. And you still got Aaron, you still have Jamal, and you still have Joker. So they were able to build out the roster almost like perfectly, like, you know what I mean? Like in order to still compete. And those are those ancillary guys who are plug and play, the KCP type players that kind of have merged up as important within the last 5 years, you know, KCP, Drew Holidays, guys like that. And essentially those are the guys who are winning the games in the finals. You can go back and see, hey, in 2020, Danny Green hit a 3, Rondo hit a 3. And in 2021, it's Drew Holiday with the steal. It's Chris Middleton. Like, you could just go down the line and really see that it was Andrew Wiggins in 22 and Jordan Poole. So it's like, once you're able to get these guys properly on the team, I mean, that's what Denver essentially just did. Again, obviously Dallas, I like what they were able to do. I feel like they got a little lucky by getting Cooper Flag, but that's a story for another day. Obviously, they have a lot of wings and they have a lot of bigs that they're going to have to work out. I like what the Spurs were able to do. They're going to be very hard to score on if you try to get the paint. If you're under 6'5" without a lot of leaping ability, with having Cornette, and you obviously got Wemby, and they are able to keep their young core together to play with their coach, Coach Johnson. Houston obviously is like the biggest one, right? It's like all three of the Texas teams did their best, but I do like what Houston was able to do. I do wish they had a little bit more shooting, just a little bit on there. They don't have as much redundancy, because if you look at how Amen plays and how Jalen was playing, it was almost the same thing. But Amen is a little bit more controlled. He knows how to read angles and space and get in the passing lanes, and he's super athletic as well, just like Jalen is. So I would say like those teams: Denver, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio.
Yeah, I really loved what Denver did, and obviously the Valanciunas thing is kind of iffy right now. We don't know if he's going to end up back in Greece yet or not, but if he is, I think if he ends up staying in Denver, I think he and the Nuggets are favorites to get to the finals, and you still have Jokic in his prime, and you did such a financial and I think a fit upgrade by getting rid of MPJ and bringing in, like you mentioned, Hardaway on the minimum and Cam Johnson for a much more value contract, who's going to be hitting those corner threes like crazy in Denver, and I will throw one more team out there. They're a bad team, and I think you guys talked about it on Griff's show, where I really like what the Wizards did, man. And, I like the pick of Trey Johnson, and, they got a lot of young guys here, and now they just got rid of, who was it? Kelly Olynyk today. Yeah. And they bring in Malachi Branham, another young scoring guard. And this is like a league pass team for me next year, man. Like Koulibaly, Sarr, Trey Johnson. Like they have some guys now alongside with Middleton and Marcus Smart and some veteran leadership. I really don't think it's out of the realm that they could contend for the 10 seed play-in spot. And they probably don't want to do that. They probably want to be bad for another year. But I think they get rid of Jordan Poole, which was kind of a weird fit, bring in McCollum, so you got a nice mix of vets and youth. And if you could get like a nice leap from Bub Carrington and Sarr in year 2, I mean, this team might be a little bit better than people think.
And they have Cam Whitmore too. Cam Whitmore, he's over there as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and at least their front office is patient with them. That's the key. Right. Like their front office is patient. Where in one instance, I feel like, hey, it's December. CJ, you want to go somewhere? Hey, Chris, you want to go somewhere? Hey, Marcus, if you feel like it, if you want to, bro, you don't have to go somewhere. I just feel like that's where they're going to be. But yeah, I think they could get, right there on the bubble of 10 and compete.
Cam Whitmore never saw a shot he didn't like, so he's gonna be firing them up.
Exactly.
Let's go to the other side. What kind of moves are you like? What is this team doing? That seemed like some team making a mistake.
New Orleans. I know DeJounte is trying to come back. What do you make of Zion? What's going on with that? You still don't know. We kind of heard DeJounte on the Pivot podcast talk about how his journey back with his Achilles was bad and things he had going on back home, and he couldn't get into the facility as an escape, and it's just a lot going on. And Zion has off the court issues that he's trying to sort out, and it's always something over there. Even the Charlotte Hornets, it's like, hey, you had a chance to maybe LaMelo likes being the man. He likes getting all the shots, doesn't really play high winning basketball. So it's like, hey, I'll stay here with my buddies, be the man out here, win 25 games a season, and we can call it there. Hopefully Brandon Miller is back. He is a phenomenal game.
Great
and then Minnesota too. I feel like Minnesota should have been in the running to address their point guard issue because they don't have one still. You don't want to keep kind of kicking the tires on Mike Conley like, hey, you want to go out there and go chase Steph Curry, or you want to go out there and go guard these younger guards who are like 15 years younger than you at a high level. And I just feel like that's one thing that they didn't really take care of. And then Phoenix as well, they got a lot of stuff they're trying to sort out themselves. So I would say that those list of teams right there.
Yeah, the Minnesota one, I'm kind of surprised they weren't in on the Colin Sexton trade. And, because now bias, I've always loved Sexton's game. I think he's just been in bad tanking situations since he left Cleveland, but that would have made sense. I think they're really leaning into Dillingham and maybe Ant as a creator more, which we'll see. But I'm not sure how that's going to work. But one team that you didn't mention that I kind of want to talk about is the Bucks, it's really the fact that they are stretching Dame's deal over 5 years. Like, they're going to be taking up 15% of their salary cap doing this. And, it might be a little bit less depending on how much the cap increases, but, a lot of reports are suggesting it won't increase by as much as some people think. So you're just allocating all this money, a sizable chunk of your cap, so you could bring in Miles Turner. And so now you got like this Turner as the next Brooke Lopez thing, and you don't really have a great backcourt. It's like what Kevin Porter Jr., you brought him back. It's just like what are we doing? And it feels like a lot of people have said this, but at that point, might as well just trade Giannis then, right? Because it's just like you brought back Bobby Portis, nice rotation guy, nice rotation big, and obviously you have Giannis, a top 5 player in the world. But like, even in a depleted East, like, are you even better than the 6th seed? Like, I don't think so. And then they had like the reporting on the rumors that Dame wasn't told anything and all that. Now that there's kind of conflicting reports with that, but so we don't know how true that is. But if it is, that's just like a really bad way to run an operation in a player first league. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
What was your take on the Bucks thing?
Yeah, again, it doesn't seem like they know what they want to do or who's driving the boat, right? Like, it's like, well, you try it. Well, I don't want to do it. It's like, this has been the case since they won their championship, right? Like, you didn't have in between then, you know what I mean? You got Doc, you got Griffin, you got Bud, and then that's going up and down. And then, you get rid of pretty much your core guys. Drew Holiday gets moved, and then you have Dame, and then you're trying to pair him with Giannis, but people forget that Dame, that adjustment period of him playing was going to be so different because he's always had the ball in his hands, and now you pair him with the guy who likes the ball in his hands to create. So it looked good in spurts, but outside of that, they were just never able to stay healthy. So you never really fully got to see the full version of Middleton, Lopez, Lillard, and Giannis. If I'm Giannis, he seems like a very nice guy who got a good head on his shoulders. He wants to do right by people. If he's able to go to the GMs and they're like, listen, guys, what can we do to get me to another situation, whatever teams it's going to be? Let's all take our time. Let's take the summer off. Let's come back after summer league, August, September-ish. Let's kind of sort this out because it's pointless for him to stay there. And as hard as he plays, he seems like just an injury away from missing a season, right? So it's like you want his prime to count. And, he's got all the accolades. Now he just needs to, kind of even it out a little bit more. And I think on another team would be his best bet.
Yeah, the window is closing a bit there, I think, because Giannis is, in his late 20s now, early 30s coming this season, I think. And he has never really developed a really consistent jump shot, and especially a three. And so once that athleticism starts to fade a little bit, and once you have, the injuries and the wear and tear start to bound up as you enter your 30s, you start to wonder, like, how he's always going to be a great player, but is he still just that supernova type of talent that's going to be your focal point of a championship as he ages? So, if he wanted to make a move, I feel like the time is now, but there is a precedent too. European stars generally don't ask out, so he might be the first who really wanted out, like because Luka didn't want to leave Dallas, and
No, he didn't. You're
some
right.
of the guys over the years, like Dirk and stuff, they came close to leaving but never did, and so we'll see if he becomes the first guy, because it just seems like they kind of latch onto a team like, this is cool, and they're going back home in the summer anyway, so it doesn't even matter, like
Right.
Jokic, as soon as the buzzer hits, he's got the plane ready, to get over to Serbia, so
Yeah, he got his horses are ready and everything. They're just waiting for him.
okay.
That's all he's thinking about. He's just like, oh, I cannot wait to lose this series. Let's wrap this up. Come on, guys. I'm either going to win or I'm going to lose it. Let's wrap this up.
Get out of here. I wanted to close, Chris, talk about your activity and your presence on Threads. So Threads is an interesting platform, just in my eyes, because ironically, it's kind of like one of the newer social media platforms where it recently is kind of gone neck and neck with X in terms of active users. But the problem is that a lot of these sports journalists and personalities and stuff, they still post there because they're like, well, my user base is there, so I don't really see a point in leaving. Like Colin Cowherd said that a while ago. He's like, look, man, I've been on this platform for 15 years and I've amassed millions of followers. You're going to give me a way to take them with me? Sure. But until further notice, I don't really care. And so you've kind of entered this space now where you're almost like a newsbreaker. I don't want to insult you and call you an aggregator, but you're more like a newsbreaker for Threads, because while Shams and Chris Haynes post on Threads, they kind of do their activity on X, and then Threads is kind of a secondary citizen. So I guess, like, how did you get into wanting to fill that void that was so kind of glaringly obvious now in retrospect on the Threads platform?
Yeah, I would say like just kind of just one in that field, right? Because Threads doesn't have an algorithm, and the more you're in someone's algorithm, the more they get your content. Like, right, you can like one thread from somebody, and then they'll show you 40 more in the next 10 minutes while you're scrolling. So I had to figure out a way, okay, how can I get the information that's not being posted on here just yet from the bigger accounts like Shams and guys like that, because they just simply don't use it just yet. I get it. They're totally preoccupied with that because that's how they break their news, because it's in real time, and that's just not something that Threads has fully, unless you kind of get your algorithm in line like that. Then you kind of start to see once the conversations are going on there. So I figure for myself, like, I had my guy Trey was just like, listen, man, people don't, not everyone on Threads follows Shams, right? Or maybe he's not in their algorithm. So why don't you just do it? And I started thinking, I'm like, yeah, why don't I just do it? And then I just started putting it out there. And in that span of time from trade deadline or for free agency, I probably gained like almost 200 more followers just in that span of time, in a week and a half, by putting that information out there, obviously posing questions. And then I post reels on Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that. But Threads is like one of the main platforms. As Griff calls me, the Threads merchant, a ripoff of the free throw merchant, you know what I mean? So that's what he kind of calls me on there. So, I stuck with it. I put it in the bio. So it's just, since it's a new place, just trying different things. And it's been successful so far, just breaking the news and bringing it to people from all the things that I find interesting. And one thing I try to do is, like, obviously the main news is always on there, but what about the numbers that are based down to it? And what I try to do always is give credit to the source of whom I may have gotten the information from or I read it from. So it's like, don't yell at me. I'm just a messenger. Yell at that person. You know what I mean? So it's just, I just have a lot of fun with it. You know what I mean? It feels good to kind of have built a community and built that inside NBA Threads. And yeah, it's been great, man. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I think there really is some upward momentum. Like a guy who's been more active lately is Ryan Russillo from The Ringer. And he even mentions it on this pod. It's like, oh yeah, I saw this on Threads. And I can't think of, like, even though like guys like Zach Lowe and stuff, they're on there and they post, but they're not on their platforms talking about it. And I think that there is some momentum inside the NBA. Kind of had a little Thread highlight this past over the playoffs, right? And for me, it's become a great conversational avenue to talk NBA on there, because like a lot of times, you're posting into the void on Twitter if you're not being controversial. And with Threads, I feel like I'm able to kind of say the kind of stuff I want to say. Some people might not agree with it, it's fine. But there is conversations happening. I think it is a very interesting platform that more brands need to take notice of. Obviously, you don't want it to be a situation where it kind of diminishes the reach of people like me and you who are just trying to have good basketball conversation. But I do think there is a lot of upside with the platform, which is very weird to say about a Meta product, but so
Right.
it's just like either like you're like, wow, this is from the same people that made Facebook. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, right.
Right. So but yeah, you do awesome work on there, man. And and I'm not just saying this because you're a guest on my podcast. I really do think you're one of the better follows for any NBA fan on Threads. So
Appreciate
let
that,
them
man.
know.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, let the people know where they can follow you first of all, and if you have anything else you're working on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like Omar mentioned, follow me on Threads at Chris Lindsey Hoops. Also on Instagram, where I put reels, post stories, talk about the game. It's the same handle on TikTok as well. I'll put stuff on there, so I'm kind of leaning into that a little bit more with TikTok, trying to figure that out. So being here in Los Angeles, I'm going to be covering some of the Drew League in the next couple of weeks. So look out for some of that stuff, which should be pretty cool. Kind of brighten the light on LA hoops, over there on Threads, because really no one really talks about it that much, right? I'm going to be doing that. So yeah, man, that's where I'm at. Threads, TikTok, Instagram, obviously it's connected at Chris Lindsey Hoops.
And we'll have all of Chris's links in the show notes here. So if you want to give him a follow, I highly encourage that you do so. If you like this podcast, we are available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on video with Spotify. So if you want to see a couple guys just yapping on video, you can do that on Spotify, which is great. Thank you, as always, for tuning in for another episode of the podcast. Chris, thanks again for joining me for this just illuminating conversation about CBA and the direction of the league. And until next time, I'm your host, Omar Zaran. This is the Deep Cover Podcast.